Good afternoon. We'd like to call the Ordinance Committee meeting to order. Let's start with a roll call.
Mayor Pro Tem Rouse.
Here.
Mayor Murillo.
Here.
Madam Chair Snedden.
Here. And to begin with, do we have any public comment for items not on the agenda? No. Okay. So seeing none, we'll go on to the staff presentation on the subject of ordinance restricting the use and sale of expanded polystyrene products within the city of Santa Barbara.
Great. Good afternoon. Renee Irely, Environmental Services Manager, and I am back again to talk about the expanded polystyrene ordinance language. And today I'll go briefly over the background of how we got here, go through the key elements in the ordinance itself, some of the outreach that we have been doing on the ordinance, and then next steps. So we first brought this item to the Sustainability Committee back in October and came then here to the Ordinance Committee. And since then, over the course of the last 7 years, we're now up to 116 cities in California that have adopted similar ordinances. So regarding the ordinance and its elements, first I'll go through the scope of the key regulated activities, and then talk a little bit about the implementation timeline for the ordinance to be adopted, and then the exemptions. So originally we were focused on takeout or dine-in foam food and beverage containers. At committee direction, we also took a look at retail sale to add to the list of regulated activities. So you'll see here, this is the first key element of regulated activities that we are proposing to put into the ordinance. And this would be directed at the dine-in or takeout containers. Whereas all food providers within the city utilizing disposal food containers will provide, any food provider within the city to provide prepared food in or provide separately any disposable food container made from an expanded polystyrene except as exempted. And I'll go through those exemptions a little bit later on in the presentation. The second key element of the proposed ordinance would actually, to be more specific about what acceptable alternatives are for those food containers. And this would state that all food providers within the city utilizing disposable food containers shall use biodegradable, compostable, or recyclable products. To cover the sale of the expanded polystyrene products, such as cups, plates, or ice chests at grocery, drug, or convenience stores, this section of the ordinance would stipulate that no vendor or events promoter in the city may sell or otherwise provide any expanded polystyrene product which is not wholly encapsulated or encased within a more durable material, again, except as exempted. And I'll go through that again in a minute. Regarding exemptions, first I wanted to talk through a little bit about the hardship application process, and this is an element that we are proposing to include in the ordinance as well. And we envision that this would be an annual application that any business could submit, again, every year, and it would be reviewed on a case-by-case basis and would consider any unique financial or economic situations. We spent quite a bit of time talking about the ordinance across the board with the potentially affected population. We talked to over 80% of the food retailers in the city, along with the grocery stores and other convenience stores. We had 4 that were explicit in voicing some concern about potential financial hardships, one of them including blenders, which I know we had talked about the last time that we were here. And my team did sit down and talk with blenders and walk them through the process, and hopefully that they found that this was an acceptable means to be able to exempt them from the ordinance itself. It certainly, we envision it to be a simple process, and as long as a business has good data on why they're unique or in a financial bind, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to be exempted from the process. In addition, we would like to designate these types of uses as exempt within the ordinance itself. These are also very typical across the ordinances across the state, and that would be any prepackaged food that's coming from outside the city, which we don't have control over, packaging for raw meat, fish, or eggs, given certain public health issues. Anything that's already completely encapsulated, so the ice chests that come already in a hard, durable plastic, obviously you can't get to the styrofoam within them, so they would be exempt. The same for construction products, mail packaging, and then also including language that in the event of some sort of emergency or disaster where we would need to suspend some or all of the ordinance during that time. So we are proposing that the ordinance would take effect 6 months after adoption by council, and it would apply to both the restaurants and the retail businesses simultaneously. And our recycling outreach team works with all of the businesses that would be regulated, and we really look at them as sort of like the first wave of education and enforcement of the ordinance itself. But we are proposing language in the ordinance that would be scalable. So in the event that outreach is not doing what it needs to do to get compliance, that we would be able to escalate somewhat to warnings, notices, or notice of violations. And that would be similar to how we regulate other parts of our recycling programs currently. And then regarding Sequa review, every ordinance that we've seen that's been adopted across the state locally over the last 3 years has been exempt from Sequa. We anticipate that would be similar in our case. However, we are still verifying that. In the event that that's not the case and we do need to do additional review, we'll bring back a timeline and any costs associated with that as well. And then finally, we were also asked to look at the idea of by request only regulation of certain single-use products like straws and stirrers and cutlery. So our team went and spoke with, again, the food retailers in the city, and it seemed a very easily adoptable practice on their part by a large majority. There was a lot of support for it, and 6 of the retailers we'd already spoken with had already adopted it voluntarily as well. So we've brought forth suggested language that would say that beverage or food provider must first ask whether a customer wants to receive the plastic cutlery, beverage straw, or plastic stir to include in the ordinance as well. And And then finally, just wanted to reiterate that we have spoken with virtually every food retailer and a large random sample of other retailers over the last 8 months about the ordinance and its potential components. The majority of the businesses have been supportive of the measure and appreciated the outreach that we've done ahead of time with them. We certainly will continue to provide that outreach and education to them should we move forward with the ordinance. And with that, we recommend that that we move forward to have City Council adopt an ordinance prohibiting the retail sale of expanded polystyrene products and the use of expanded polystyrene products at food serving businesses. And with that, I'd be happy to take your questions.
Thank you. Madam Mayor?
Thank you, Ms. Ierly, for that. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I saw a reference in the report giving it a 1 year before we enforce or adopt. And I see here you're saying 6 months. What was your thinking on that, ma'am?
Thank you, Chair Stern and Madam Mayor. We would, I guess I should clarify the question. We would look to have the ordinance be in place at least 6 months from the adoption, but probably look at any sort of enforcement to be more like of a year out. That way we could give all of the retailers the opportunity to get into compliance, be able to address any additional questions that they have as we're doing the outreach once the ordinance is in place.
So that there would be plenty of time then for people to get used to the idea, and if they had some polystyrene products that they needed to finish using, right, if they had a big stock of them, is that the thinking?
Absolutely. That's certainly right. A part of the idea is in gaining compliance is to be able to have it be successful, and that we certainly recognize that there are going to be businesses that have some sort of stockpile of existing material that they're going to need to clear through before they're... Yeah.
And then I have a question that might be for the city attorney. It's about the plastic straws. So if today we proposed to be stronger on plastic straws and said we'd like to just ban those outright too, instead of it being part of the suggestive, just ask the person if they want that, are we properly agendized to talk about that and put that forward today?
Madam Chair and Madam Mayor, I looked at today's agenda, and the agenda for today's Ordinance Committee meeting only speaks to the expanded polystyrene portion of the ordinance. The draft ordinance we were preparing was anticipating that the whole discussion would occur. However, those two did not get matched up. If the committee wants to push forward the language for the plastic straws, stirrers, and other cutlery, I recommend that we either continue this item, that portion of it here at the Ordinance Committee, or it could be agendized on a separate track, and you could go forward with the polystyrene portion of the ordinance today.
Could we, if we decided to recommend it to the City Council, could we just send it all to the City Council?
That would be essentially acting on the on-demand portion of the ordinance, which was not agendized today.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I knew you would know.
Madam Chair, I do have one comment to make on the last question regarding the effective date of the ordinance. If the committee or council has concerns about food service providers or other retailers having existing stockpiles, I would recommend that you consider that issue in assigning an effective date, but not have this enforcement question up in the air once the ordinance is effective. In other words, if you have that concern that retailers or food service providers need to go through their inventory or should have the opportunity to go through that inventory before they're subject to the ordinance's requirements. I would recommend that you set the date far enough in advance that they can have made those accommodations prior to the effective date of the ordinance, as opposed to having some question where, well, one retailer has gone through their inventory, the ordinance is effective, and they're fully in compliance with the ordinance. Another vendor still has more inventory and is choosing to, even though the ordinance is effective, they're still going through it. I don't see that as being a level playing field at that point in time. My recommendation would be that you consider that issue in assigning a particular effective date for the ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Vincent, I'm going to ask for clarification. Is that the chair asked the question? I know maybe the public might wonder as well. I'm in the food serving business, so I'm able to, however, talk about this because it's a widespread citywide ordinance. So that is there's any conflict or reason I shouldn't participate?
In this particular case, I think it's a wide enough effect in the regulated, the scope of the regulated industry, and your position within it falls within an exception to the conflict rules for the public generally, not distinguishing your business in any. Your business is not distinguishable from the others that would be regulated under the ordinance.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I had a question also about if there are any issues with the medical industry. I was recently doing a hospital visit and realized that there are a lot of styrofoam cups, and if there was any maybe exception to that might be made.
Thank you, Chair Sneddon. Right now, we do not view them as falling under the ordinance as is written. And however, if you felt the need to suggest additional language to exempt them, that would be up to you too.
No, that's fine. Thank you. And then also another question about the hardship. So if it's on a yearly basis, does there need to be progress toward a solution in that year, or can a business just forever have their business plan modeled on polystyrene and just keep getting an exemption every year?
Thank you. Currently, as we have it written and envisioned, it would be an annual review, and it could be approved all or in part. I think ideally, the reason for having the ordinance is to move beyond the use of the expanded polystyrene. And so part of that discussion, were it to go on year to year, would be how is not moving forward and using alternatives fitting into the, for example, if it's a financial hardship issue, how is that playing out over time? So I would still say it's on a case-by-case basis, but certainly that's part of the discussion, is to encourage the movement beyond.
And then one more question. That would be at the discretion of who, or what group, or single?
We have it written as the finance director or their designee, but so.
Okay. So of a single person?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And without any further questions for staff, we'll take public comment. Penny Owens, Santa Barbara Channel Keeper.
It showed up too, yep. Good afternoon, Chair, Council members. Penny Owens with Santa Barbara Channel Keeper. You may have found your Skip the Straw SB sticker up there for you. We're pleased that the City of Santa Barbara is joining the growing list of 116 cities in California taking action to reduce foam pollution. We'd also like to share that we're very pleased that just 2 weeks ago, at the end of May, the City of Carpinteria actually voted unanimously to direct their staff to develop an education plan and draft regulations for providing straws, utensils, and condiments on demand, which will afford even greater protection for their local creeks, beaches, and ocean. Channel Keeper strongly supports the common elements of statewide foam ordinances outlined in the staff report, including a ban of EPS foodware and the retail sale of EPS products, exemptions for economic hardship, and food packaged outside the city limits. We also strongly support that Santa Barbara's foam ordinance include an additional polystyrene regulation to provide plastic cutlery as well as plastic straws and stirrers, similar on demand, similar to Culver City and Long Beach. So that's just that on-demand request. We also encourage the proposed timeline for implementation. There's been extensive outreach to local businesses about this issue, and there's also the possibility for businesses to apply for that economic hardship if they do need that extra time to come into compliance. As we've mentioned in the past, we're conducting outreach and education every time we're out in the community, and we're happy to continue to assist with these efforts. And as you heard from some of our student groups, our Skip the Straw campaign in partnership with CEC, local school groups, and local businesses has been really successful, and businesses are ready to take this step. And some of them started providing straws on request from our initial outreach about the program before the students even visited. Over the last few weeks, we've been out at many community beach cleanups here in Santa Barbara with various community groups, and our Channel Keeper volunteers have picked up 484 plastic straws, which I was pretty surprised by. We've also picked up almost 2,500 pieces of styrofoam, and that's not including the parent objects that we were able to identify, like the styrofoam cups or the clamshells, which we find many of as well. With the adoption of this foam ordinance, we look forward to finding less foam and plastic pollution on our regular creek and beach cleanups in the future. So thank you again for your important work on this issue.
Thank you so much.
may I
Mayor
ask-
Murillo has a question.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So in other cities where the styrofoam is banned, like in Carp, you said. So, I know Blenders has a concern. How do they serve their smoothies? I assume there's smoothie drinking going on in Carpinteria.
There is. So Carpinteria's foam ordinance is actually, they adopted it in 2008, and it became effective in 2009. And so their businesses have had to adapt, and they provide their smoothies in a plastic cup, which Blenders had actually given a trial run to this past fall. It was just that many of their customers found that, he can speak to it better than me, but
Of course.
many of the customers found that the smoothies were melting too quickly.
Okay.
But I will say, I just got a smoothie yesterday in my insulated reusable cup with my reusable straw, and all went well. It works.
I have one too. I have one of the plastic, reusable cups.
Yeah, and then
Even
here
though
in
they're
town, many other smoothie businesses do provide smoothies without using the styrofoam cups, and they seem to be able to continue to have their customers returning. So I think there's just a period of adoption and behavior change.
Okay, I just was looking for your perspective on that, so thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next, we will have Hillary Hauser from Heal the Ocean.
Chair Sten, members of the committee, Hillary Hauser from Heal the Ocean, and all I can say is yay. It's just wonderful to be at this place, to be discussing this. Of course, I handed you old news. We all know this about styrofoam. It's really just lethal in the ocean, and I'm on the board of the Jack Johnson Foundation that funds a lot of environmental work around the world, and we talk about this and talk about this. What can we do about this? This is like one of the worst items out in nature that just gets smaller, smaller, smaller. The fish eat it. We're eating this stuff ourselves So in regard to, for years, it's good to see the city catch up with the people, because the people are already saying, no, don't, please, I would like the piece of whatever I had for dinner, but would you put it in a piece of tinfoil? I don't want that box, that clamshell box. Starbucks served its cold drinks in recyclable plastic cups. It's the, and with all due respect to Blenders, which is so popular, what they sell, they can also, I'm not going to say, but they do the same thing as Starbucks. And Blenders, a lot of people are saying, what are they doing? What are they doing? Recyclable plastic cups are usable for all cold drinks, including hospitals. So I don't know that would be an issue. So I say yes to the committee moving forward with this ordinance to the City Council, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for recommending the next item to be straws and stirrers. It was a thrill to go to Cava in Montecito last night, and the straws were bamboo. So a lot of people are getting hep, and it's time for us to get with it, and I appreciate you moving forward with this, and then do the next. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Art Tracewell.
So I don't want to be the standard bearer for EPS foam. I never have been, but we did get a tremendous amount of pushback when we made the move to plastic last year. And I shared some of the comments with you, and I sat down with Councilman Rouse and showed that we had a 10% drop in sales during the period, and so it was a hardship to us. However, I am looking hard and working with DART to come up with an alternative package, and I've finally been able to get some traction there. I just got off the phone with Becky Cole at DART, who has a PET cup that they are developing right now. They have it in an 8-ounce size. She's working on a 12 and 24-ounce size that would work for us. She says, I haven't seen it, she says it does insulate, it performs, which is my whole thing. It's a little different than Starbucks iced coffee because it'll stay cold, but our product goes from thick to runny, so that's the difference there, and that's what upset people so much. So in terms of exemptions and hardship, I just need time, I think. I would love to move away from EPS. We've increased our mug discount from 25 cents to 50 cents, and we've postered, and we've quadrupled the number of discounts that we give. So it's working. We are starting, there's an awareness there, I think, that's happening citywide, and it's paying off for people. The straw piece, I'm also, we're willing to work on that. I don't want to be throwing plastic straws into the ocean. So whether it's bamboo, we could sell bamboo, we could sell metal, we could try pasta, paper won't work. So we're up for anything. So we're just looking to buy some time. Yeah.
Mr. Tracewell, I just want to thank you for working so hard to move this forward for all of us too. And I think this is, so many things that we could do, but just in response to that, having ordinances or economic pressure to make a change, and you're pushing forward and looking for a new way. And I really appreciate you coming and giving us an update on that, because even in your absence, when we discussed this last time, that was all we were talking about was blenders. Well, what's blenders going to do? So we value you, and I thank you for coming in and giving us your perspective so we can take that into account and for moving forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And next we'll have Kathy King from CEC.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of Ordinance Committee. I echo Penny and Hillary and everything that they said. Yay, thank you so much for making this happen. It's been a long road, and we need the momentum to get this passed at the state level. It took 200 plastic bag laws, which we were part of, in order for the state to really feel the pressure and take the action. I think that it would be really great if we could roll the opt-in piece into this law to avoid having to draft subsequent ordinances. I can see where you're going with a ban on straws, but I really feel from the outreach that we've done and the momentum that we're seeing that people are ready to give up straws. It's so easy. It took a while to get people convinced that they didn't need plastic bags. It takes a nanosecond to get people to realize, straw, I don't need that. So I really feel like this could be one where we're all working together rather than having to use a hammer on it. That's just my personal opinion. But if it could be wrapped into the ordinance, and I would also love to see chopsticks and condiments laid out in that as well for the opt-in, just so that it's a full slate of things that people don't need unless they ask for them. And I think the 6-month timeline would be great. I feel like with what we just heard from blenders, which is wonderful, they could apply for a year exemption, and maybe that would be enough. And that other chains and bigger grocery stores have other outlets that they could send their inventory to. So, and I think that the percentage that the environmental services team has worked so hard to figure out what percentage has already given up styrofoam, and it's significant. So I don't feel like there's enough left out there that we have to give it a year. And it would be great for the state to see a more aggressive timeline from us, I think. And also, we're going to continue, as we did with plastic bags, on from here to other parts of the county. And it would also be a nice precedent to have going forward there. And this is a global issue. National Geographic cover story for June is plastic. And it takes up most of that issue. And I listened to a podcast about it yesterday where they are going to do a 3-year campaign on this. And that is the longest campaign that National Geographic has ever done in its history. So for a publication like that to take this action and try to raise awareness, it's a huge issue. And single-use plastic has become a global scourge. And whatever we can do to reduce it is great for us and for the world. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And
May I ask
Mayor
you-
Murillo?
Ms. King, so can you clarify what you were saying about straws? So today we're only agendized to do the, on demand, but you're saying do bring it back.
Well, it sounded like the on-demand piece needed to be brought back. Maybe I misunderstood that, but if it doesn't, then I would love for this to just move forward as it is with that in there. Because you were mentioning maybe a separate ordinance on straws.
So I haven't heard from my colleagues. They hear me cheering for it over here. But I think we would have to put forward the on-demand part of the straw for now to City Council. And then I'm ready to make a motion that we bring a ban on straws back. I mean, not right this moment. I'm saying, yeah, I'm.
Well, I was just
I would
weighing
be
in
ready
on that.
to make the motion.
Okay.
When the time is right, but so okay. You are saying you think there's a lot of acceptance in the public. Okay.
I do, yeah. And we haven't seen, we don't have data for you. Malibu's straw ban, I think, goes into effect July 1. There's a couple places that have passed them, and we can't come back to you, and we can't give you any news on how those rollouts have gone, because I don't think any of them have been implemented yet. So, but the on-demand piece does seem to have great traction.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
And I think, Madam Chair, we'd have to have staff bring back the whole straw thing anyway.
I think we should discuss it fully.
Yeah.
I'm completely in support, and I think whatever order that we need to do that in carefully to make sure that it
Appropriately.
moves forward appropriately. Yeah. Yes. And Mayor Pro Tem Rouse, did you have?
First, a question and a comment. So we keep coming back to the straw thing, which Mr. Vinci already gave us direction on. Doesn't council have to direct Ordinance Committee to have that discussion normally in protocols?
Madam Chair and Councilmember Rouse, there are a number of ways items can come to the Ordinance Committee. They can come from administrative requests, and so not every ordinance is directed by council to the Ordinance Committee. The city administrator and staff can also bring ordinances to. My impression was that the last discussion we had at this committee, there was talk of, from the committee itself wanting to see about on-demand items as well, and so that's where staff was taking their direction on bringing forward proposals for on-demand. It's just simply what happened for this particular meeting was it was an old agenda language that didn't incorporate the on-demand portion of the ordinance in the agenda.
All right, very good. Well, I have, I'm in agreement with all the speakers, and certainly, Ms. Hauser, Ms. King, and Ms. Owens made kind of the arguments that I would make along with Mr. Tracewell. The overriding thing is we do have we have a litter problem more than anything. I mean, no matter what we do or don't have out there, it's a litter problem. It's not necessarily the product itself existing in the universe. When we talk about staff outreach, which I'm very happy to have seen, and what I'd asked for before was the comparative prices for the different containers, and you do have them listed there in our agenda report. What I'm getting, other than I'm not an official pollster, but I do get a fair amount of input from my colleagues in the industry, is not so much resistance to the ideas put forward, but to a what's next scenario. And that's something that has caused a lot of angst. Everybody's a bit of a cat on a curtain right now in terms of business. So that clarification or clarity or desire going forward is going to be really, really important, because outreach is important, but where we get our outreach from is from the public. When my business changed from EPS into the containers I use today, it wasn't because of an ordinance, it was because the public was kind of demanding. I'm sure Mr. Tracewell gets pressure along those lines as well, as like, what are you guys doing? And of course, they haven't found the proper substitute just yet. What I do appreciate about Blender's efforts, and I have been following the email threads between them and Dart company, the drink or the cup manufacturers, is a bona fide good faith effort to try to find an alternative. And if there were to be an exemption for that kind of good faith effort, however you state it in an ordinance, I think that is completely worthwhile, because they really are trying to get this done and get it done correctly. I just am concerned as we go through these different materials, because the public has formed opinions and has forced us or encouraged us to move away from things like plastic straws and containers and whatnot. And it kind of reminds me of the whole thing with water. We had a request to conserve water, and the public exceeded it by 10%. We raised it 10%. They exceeded it by another 10%. The public's pretty compelling. The public's way, way, way ahead of us on the smoking issue. And it's almost like we should really put out something about the litter part of the issue. We do beach cleanups and whatnot, but there was a big push in the 50s and 60s with litter signs everywhere, and that was a big deal. And I think that's just as important as anything, because I think Ms. King brought it up, is that what we do here is important, but it's a worldwide problem. You'll still get the Amazon box full of the little popcorn, the Syro popcorn things or whatever once in a while. And Lord knows what happens when we ship the stuff over to places to have it recycled. The other concern is this, is as we move through these materials, things like cardboard that take a lot of water, a lot of glue, and have a lot of toxics in them are not necessarily wonderful. And the market for recyclable plastics is pretty much gone through the floor. So we have to be a little bit careful about saying we've just fixed something. And that's going back to the thing about my industry cohort saying, well, now what? We're going to do this, we're going to do that. Is it going to be paper napkins next? Is it going to be, what is going to be next? And I think we need more of a master plan than a chip away at what we're trying to do and why. And we have to have good, solid reasons why. So I will be going forward with this EPS ban, even though I do think that, mainly because I know it's going to pass. But number two is, I do think the public has stated their preferences already. I don't think we really need, we can't keep solving our social and structural issues with ordinances. It's ridiculous, it's hard to enforce. Making up some kind of onerous amnesty program or some kind of exception, I think it really needs to remain discretionary for the finance director. I think we can work with people and we're already doing 80% of the work anyway. People already have given it up through outreach. And I think that's important. That's probably more important than any ordinance we're going to do up here. So I'll hang in with you guys, but it's with gritted teeth.
I would like to add, we're a coastal city, we're a tourist city. Not only do we produce more than 10 times more waste than a comparable city our size, but because of tourism, we're producing plastic and throwaway and single-use products that are not winding up in the landfill. So in addition to it being a litter problem, I would say it is a problem with it existing in the universe. We now have garbage patches the size of Texas or larger that can be walked on. We're learning more and more that we're interrelated, that what happens in our little city is not just isolated, especially when we live in a coastal zone where what winds up in the ocean winds up in the larger currents and is part of a global pattern where we now have sheens of plastic across the tops of the oceans where the plankton can't live and get enough sunshine. It's all directly related to those tiny little seemingly innocuous pellets of that expanded polystyrene. And now, I mean, the national cry to ban plastic straws and how often we see those just tossed aside. I'm for pushing this as far as we possibly can. So when your colleagues ask what next, I would hope all of it is next and incrementally over time. And I understand that it takes time for businesses to adjust. I was very excited at Trader Joe's to see they have the now compostable bags and they're dissolvable. And in some of those plastic bags now, they're dissolvable in water and safe enough to drink. So I do think that ordinances and the type of pressure that comes from this direction does create innovation to address these problems. I just don't believe that we're isolated and can ignore our impact on the entire globe, really. So I'll be supporting this and then asking in what way that we can at least discuss or bring forward a stronger plastic straw and stirrers. And then maybe we should discuss now whether we want to roll in the having on demand included in this ordinance and then talk about a ban as a separate ordinance or take advice, direction.
Sure.
Yes.
So, Madam Chair, you have had during public comment today, and again, public comment, people, as you know, will speak their minds. They'll cover both topics on the agenda and they will cover topics that aren't necessarily on the agenda. The committee can, in response to public comment, give direction to staff to take action, to return to the committee with a particular, with a response. So in this particular case, staff has already gone down that direction. It's just that the agenda today didn't reflect that. So one approach would be to continue this hearing to either next week or another time certain, and then cover this again with a complete agenda. I would remind the committee, the ordinance that you're considering is already suggesting a 6-month effective date. So the fact that you adopt it today, it still doesn't go into effect until January of next year. If you adopt it next week, it is still January 1 of next year. So one approach to correct the agenda issue today would be to simply continue this to next week. We'll re-agendize the item, including the on-demand discussion. The ordinance will look the same as it does now, and we'll keep on working along.
And then I had another question as a matter of form. For ordinances, is it, more advisable to wrap in all of those into a single ordinance or to have them separate, plastic straws and stirrers separate, or address each of these separately?
Sure. The draft ordinance that's been prepared so far puts the two items into two separate chapters. They do operate a little bit differently. They cover the polystyrene ordinance has a slightly broader scale in the sense that it covers both food providers as well as the retailers of the items, and that would be a discussion for you to have as far as the plastic cutlery. It's one thing to regulate food providers and when they're handing out to-go food and what they are providing along with that. However, we all, I'm pretty sure, at least I know I do, in my garage, have a box of plastic cutlery. I got it at Costco, but anyway, that's a separate conversation. I could see it cutting different ways. We consciously separated those two topics into two different chapters. I think the polystyrene you have a really strong handle on. The cutlery, that's a conversation I haven't seen at this committee, fully developed, and so that has other issues to consider.
As a committee, how do we feel about polystyrene and straws and continuing until next week, or would you like to leave it at polystyrene? Let's discuss. Mayor Pro Tem Rouse?
I have no problem with continuing this, Madam Chair, but I do think the EPS is unique to its own issues as opposed to trying to wrap in everything else by the same token. We're talking about the material itself. Now you're going to get off into, like you say, medical fields, other things, and I think it could be a slippery slope to a very long and unfruitful discussion.
Thank you. Mayor Murillo?
I guess I would ask Ms. Irely and Ms. Grisanti to say next week. That might not work for our schedules or for staff to bring back a straw item. I guess we could just say the next most convenient.
2 weeks would be better based on how the clerk sets
2
the
weeks.
agenda, because tomorrow the agenda will set the agenda for next week. So it's putting a rush on Ms. Irely to see if she can get that report done.
But Mr. Vincent's point is well taken, that we're doing something with long-term effects, that putting it off for 2 weeks is to grab the other issue seems prudent. But whether it's in the same ordinance or two separate ordinances, I think the package should all go to City Council at one time, right? That's what, right? The whole package should go to City Council. And I wasn't talking about cutlery myself or stirs. I was saying straws and the rest of it under the on-demand. But if someone has an argument that we should add more things in there, I guess this is the time to talk about that. Madam Chair.
Mayor Pro Tem Rouse?
And yeah, Madam Mayor, that's exactly my point, is that we could get out
What
into the
next?
weeds and we'll be talking about this 6 months from now and not going to where everybody in the audience seems to want to go. So, which I'm fine with. I really think that we're outperforming any ordinance we could do anyway as a public. We're putting the good housekeeping seal of approval on the community. I get all that. But in terms of the practical realities of use of and EPS and straws and all that, everybody's already evolving into the direction we want them to go without an ordinance. So you can do it either way, but that was my point, was we're going to get out in the hinterlands.
So, Madam Chair, Bob Samario, Finance Director, make a suggestion. Again, continue this for 2 weeks. Don't presume the outcome of that today. Let's just bring back the discussion of on-demand cutlery, straws, and the like. And then at that point, you can decide how you want to limit that, refine it, include some as a ban, include others as just on demand. But rather than making those decisions today, let's just continue to this whole meeting till 2 weeks. We think we understand where you're at with the EPS, but we'll just focus in 2 weeks on the other part of this that would come back as two separate ordinances ultimately, but as one package, as somebody suggested, to council at some point later.
Yeah, I would agree with this for two separate ordinances, and I'm wondering if today we could pass the expanded polystyrene part of the ordinance and close that, and then move into how we're dealing with plastics next, having possibly ban on straws and the others on demand, or have that discussion, as Mayor Pro Tem Rouse suggests, as a sort of separate topic in materials from what we're talking about with the polystyrene.
You're talking about two separate timings with council, because what we would forward this to council, then the other one would be back to ordinance and then back to council. So it kind of depends on how you want to handle it. I agree on the two separate ordinance issue, though. That makes the most sense.
Yeah, and I think continuing this versus creating a new item for discussion, I think just continue the whole discussion, but the focus will really be on the latter. Is probably easiest administratively, unless Mr. Vincent thinks otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's clear to the public that we're ready to move the polystyrene issue forward and do good things for our planet. So,
Do we have a motion?
So, Madam Chair, I wasn't trying to set a particular date for the continuance, and in fact, actually, as I'm, the 2 weeks from now, I'll be in South Carolina. So I would recommend that that the committee just simply direct staff to continue the item to a future date that is convenient for staff and the committee, and and I would say if you want to specify July, maybe sometime in August before, I'm not trying to specify the particular date, and I'll work with staff on a date that works for everyone. I don't particularly think I'm indispensable, but of the attorneys in my office, I'm more familiar with this topic than others. So that's the only reason I mentioned that.
Thank you. I think we're so anxious to get this completed, but I will entertain a motion for how we
The
want to
benefit
proceed.
too, Madam Chair, of waiting is that the small businesses and blenders, of course, and it gives them a little more time to get ready. So I don't think we're dragging our feet for bad reasons, or that we're dragging our feet at all. But
And Madam Chair, I'm sorry, we may be able to come back next week if, we don't have to do a whole new agenda report since we're continuing the item. It's already sort of framed. It's just putting it on the agenda, which we can do today for next week, if that's okay with Mr. Vincent, if he's here next week.
I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
so you're talking about the 19th?
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Do we have a motion, or would we like to make a motion to continue the item
To next week.
to next week?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I believe that passes unanimously, and we are adjourned. Thank you.